Ah, Britain! Does everyone remember before this lockdown when you could go outside, meet friends, drink, fight, and battle people in flighting to increase your charisma? No, me neither, to be honest. Fortunately for me, Ubisoft has provided us with Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the 50th installment of the AC franchise, I don't know. It throws you into 873 AD, during the Viking invasion of England.
What is this? Is this... Are we in hell? No, we're in England.
Now, before we go any further, don't forget to hit subscribe if you're new, and turn on that notification bell so that you never miss a video. I'm not going to lie to you, I don't do this story deconstruction from the high overseeing narrative perch that I possibly should. My interest faded in AC at some point during Assassin's Creed 3. I think I had to play a mission where it was hide and seek with a child and I just turned it off through sheer exhaustion. I swallowed my pride and returned for Origins, but again, that didn't last long, as I would end up scrolling through Instagram on my phone to pass time while traversing desert after desert, just to reach a quest that would have me sit through 5 minutes of drony dialogue from an uninteresting protagonist. So yeah, there's a large list of AC titles that I've missed. I got Valhalla and I was desperate to give Assassin's Creed another chance. I'd missed Odyssey and was constantly told by my friend that I should have played it, and I didn't want to make that same mistake with this title. The stars were aligned. I love Norse mythology. Deep down I love the core concept of AC, using tactics and agility in your environment to meticulously plan how to assassinate someone. On top of this, I'd just bought a PS5 and there was nothing else to play. The Allfather had written my destiny, and I was going to go into this game with an open mind. So join me on my deconstruction of this game and my overall thoughts on AC Valhalla as a whole, and so you're aware this will contain spoilers, so if you don't want to have the game ruined for you, watch up to about the 3-minute mark and then turn it off. It helps fool the YouTube algorithm into thinking I've got good content. So, the game begins at a Viking feast. You, Eivor, are a young child and you wander around the feast that's been thrown in honour of Steerborn of the Raven clan. This feast is quickly cut short as the town is ransacked by a rogue clan led by a guy called Kjotve the Cruel. Varin, your father, surrenders himself and offers his life to save the village to stop the massacre going on any longer. His life in exchange for them allowing everyone else in the village to live. Unfortunately for your father Varin, Kjotve isn't called Kjotve the Sound as Fuck Bloke, and he not only executes Varin, but then continues the raid. You escape with your life, but not before having to bear witness to some pretty graphic sacking of a village. This really did impress me in terms of an introduction to the game, and it's probably the most action to take place in a cutscene throughout the whole narrative. It's almost an assault on the senses with the amount going on, the brutality of the raid, and the fact that you're powerless as a child, being able to do nothing but really witness the executions and the buildings on fire. This introduction alone had provided me with more depth and character development than 20 hours that I spent on Origins. You escape with Sigurd, the son of Steerborn, and flee into the forest. They escape, but you're mauled by a wolf after falling from the horse, and you pass out during the attack. From there, the game fast forwards 17 years, and now Eivor has earned the nickname Wolf-Kissed, in true Viking fashion, playing down a horrific attack on a child. It's worth saying that Eivor can be played as either a male or a female, but I feel the game is catered towards you being a female character. I make this deduction due to being constantly referred to as she throughout the game, despite having massive pecs and a huge fucking beard. Eivor has been adopted by Steerborn in the 17 years that have passed, and now she hunts for Kjotve to avenge the death of her father. Her latest attempt fails, but you do manage to find your father's axe. Upon picking it up, you are greeted with a vision of Odin. I've got to say, at this point, there's no indication that this is an Assassin's Creed game. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest, but I did sit and think, how are they even going to veer towards the assassin aspect of this game? Eivor visits a local seer to discuss her vision, and is convinced to take an elixir that will allow her to revisit the vision. Somehow, I don't fucking know. In this vision, Sigurd, the son of Steerborn, and now your brother, loses his arm. The seer tells you, once you explain the vision, that it means that you will betray Sigurd, which Eivor rejects, understandably, because why would you listen to some batty old cow who makes LSD drinks in a hut? Whilst getting scolded by your adopted father for nearly starting a clan war due to your failed raid attempt, Sigurd returns from his raiding expeditions across the sea with 2 new friends, Basim and Hythim, who are dressed in white and, this is how it's introduced. The whole scene where they give Eivor the hidden blade is sort of a slap in the face. It's like it would have felt less forced if Basim had just walked up to the screen and went, "BT dubs, this is Assassin's Creed, yo!" Hythim protests about giving Eivor the hidden blade, which makes sense, as assassins need to earn the right to wield one, and if they adhere to the old practices, remove their ring finger to do so. On top of this, Eivor actually positions the blade on top of the forearm, meaning she's got this big fucking dime piece hanging off her wrist, big fucking golden cheese cutter on her wrist. It's not hidden, it's just a blade. What is this? Eivor is not an assassin. I'm playing an Assassin's Creed game as a character who just happens to know them. It's the equivalent of buying a Hitman game, and in the opening scene, Agent 47 enters a corner shop, leaves his Berettas on the counter, and the corner shop owner just picks them up. The opening credits roll, and you spend the rest of the game as a corner shop owner with silver Berettas, garroting customers who notice that the Coke cans for sale should be part of a multi-pack. I watched this scene thinking, if we forget about the time period and just say, for instance, Altair was the one who came back with Sigurd, he would have taken Eivor's heart out of her chest for suggesting that she should wear it as a prehistoric Rolex. I don't know, I guess it's a hat tip to the series whilst also being like, Vikings don't sneak about. But to me it felt like a slap in the face of the mythos around a weapon that has been built up by previous titles. This is a beat they've missed big time. Once you have it, it's never really discussed again. And if you can compare it with Ghost of Tsushima, for instance, where the aspect of sneaking around is against the code of the samurai and plays a huge part in the growth of the character, in this one it's just like, wrist knife, sick. Between the four of them, they hatch a plan to attack Kjotve against Steerborn's wishes. After raiding a village to get a foothold in the land, they are greeted by King Harold, who offers to give the Raven clan additional men in order to kill Kjotve. Now, this is a really cool introduction for the king, and it just indicates how much of a pain in the ass Kjotve has been, as even the king is like, nah, smash the bastard, despite him wanting to unify the clans of Norway under his banner. Sigurd leads an assault on Kjotve's stronghold, and Eivor kills Kjotve in combat. Following the victory, Harold announces his intention to unite all of Norway into a single kingdom under his rule. Steerborn pledges fealty to Harold, angering Sigurd, who was expected to inherit his father's crown. He and Eivor take their loyalists in the Raven clan on an exodus mission to England to build their own kingdom free of Harold's rule. From here, the fucking opening credits roll. I was like 5 hours into the game and then this pops up. Here, I realise that this game is going to be teetering on the same line that AC Origins was regarding whether I want to play it or whether I want to frisbee it across the street. And in all honesty, that's how the game continues throughout. You land in England and you are tasked with developing relationships with each of the Jarls or rulers of each territory, each one offering its own mini storyline. Each of these will have you meet a range of people, each of them with their own issues that are thrust upon you, leaving you to sometimes make quick or diplomatic decisions that can influence the story arc for that county. Each one you do sort of sits in its own narrative that, barring a few, isn't really influenced or influencing the main narrative. On top of this, a large majority of the areas that we'll go to will lean more on the Viking aspect of the game, rather than the emphasis on being an assassin. The only reminding feature of it being an Assassin's Creed game is the cutscenes after killing a high value target. Rather than before when it's just a two-way conversation with the main character and the person you've killed, now Odin is with you, and acts almost like a conscience/spiritual guide at crossroads in the narrative, which will affect Eivor's future, or the future of the people around him. To me, this is where the game's peppered the mark as well as missed it a number of times too. A lot of the areas just seem like filler, and I'd find myself trying to sprint through as much of it as possible, just so I could get the area over and done with. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of good ones, but if it's not something that you feel is complete filler, there's almost like a thick line that's like, you're an assassin, now you're a Viking and you want to raid things. There's no real cohesion between the two. The best example of where the game does well is probably London. To me, this embodies the core concept of what an Assassin's Creed game is. You're tasked with eliminating targets, and each time you do, it causes the world around you to change. The effects of your actions are influencing your surroundings. That said, despite this being a next-gen title, there's a severe lack of depth to the environment. There's no richness to it. It just seems very cut and paste rather than developing your environments to really immerse you in the game. In all honesty, I have no idea what this game is trying to be. I played the game thinking it was an RPG, but then I thought, it can't be, because it misses the mark so much. If you think of games like Fallout 3, where the passing conversations you hear, the notes you find, and the small side quests that you do sort of develop the depth to the game and really immerse you, in Valhalla, there isn't really any of that. A prime example of this is finding Excalibur or Mjolnir. You don't even get a line of dialogue or a cutscene to reward you. It's almost as if you have to make up the immersion in your head to keep playing the game. Anyway, back to the Raven clan in England. You can visit a seer that will allow you to take more of her elixir, and from there go deep into one of your visions, where you're Odin and you carry out the events that lead up to Ragnarok. Which is weird, because you're in an animus, reliving someone's memories, but then taking a potion and being able to view and interact with the Jugendru's dream. But it's not really a dream, it's memories and Fucking what? Now, there's a main questline that is weaved through the premise of pledging to each of these counties. Whilst you're doing all of these quests, Sigurd goes off with Basim on the hunt for an item, which at first I believe was cocaine, because when he returned he was telling me that he was a god, and he had all the characteristics of someone who had just inhaled half a Columbia up their nose. But no, it's an artifact. Much like the Apple of Eden from previous games, or the staff with the swirly bits on, I don't fucking know. However, he's captured by Fulke, a fanatical Order agent and servant of King Alfred of Wessex, who believes Sigurd to be an Isu, which in Assassin's Creed is a race that came before humans. Eivor and Basim track Fulke to a stronghold and kill her, but not before she has tortured Sigurd, removing his right arm. When Sigurd returns to Ravensthorpe, he is worse than before, babbling on about how the standard needs and desires of the common man are beneath him, despite lacking the basic facilities to play a piano. This is another thing that's really confused me about the narrative. Before Fulke, Basim was actually the one telling Sigurd that he was destined for great things, filling his head with destiny talk, yet, apart from popping him in his beautifully defined jaw, Eivor never really blames him past that point, despite the game being littered with you executing people for just looking at you wrong. Like, this is Basim's fault too, and all of a sudden, just because he's helping Eivor, being dead pally with her, it's like, you're traipsing across England because of this dickhead. At least let him know once in a while that he's a ball bag. It's sort of tied up in the end, but by that point, I'd scratched most of the hair off my scalp trying to keep up with what was going on. So here it goes. Sigurd returns to Norway with Eivor, because Sigurd says he's having visions, and together they uncover some sort of futuristic hidden temple with an advanced computer system. On the way to this temple though, they stop off at Steerborn's village and basically just roll up, call their dad a chicken shit, and leave. They do this because Steerborn bent his knee to avoid his clan having to go to war with an army that was 10 times its size. Yeah, I didn't get this scene either, to be fair. Sigurd's acting like he's some sort of hard bastard who can take on an army with a few blokes, despite the fact he's lost his arm to a woman who looks like fucking Lloyd Christmas. Anyway, back to the futuristic cave. Both Eivor and Sigurd connect themselves to the computer and they're transported to Valhalla, where they can enjoy endless battles in paradise. However, after seeing her father amongst the warriors, Eivor realises that Valhalla is merely a simulation and tries to break free, because her father can't be in Valhalla due to the fact he didn't die the way a Viking warrior should. Eivor's visions of Odin refuse to let her leave. Somehow. I mean, this is a vision inside a simulation that's manifested itself to keep her inside the simulation because, symbolism. You end up defeating Odin by forfeiting your father's act and escape the simulation with Sigurd. Outside the computer, you're confronted by Basim, who reveals that Eivor, Sigurd and himself are in fact reincarnations of Odin, Tyr and Loki respectively. Fucking what? First of all, how the fuck did Basim find them? I've just got this image of Eivor and Sigurd travelling across the sea in their ship, and Basim just following them on a little rowboat with his hood up surrounded by monks to stay incognito. Secondly, the revelation that their reincarnations was sort of alluded to previously. It wasn't really a gasp moment, it was more of a, oh, that's where we're going. It's made obvious by the fact that Odin sounds exactly like male Eivor, so the cover is essentially blown from the first cutscene of the game if you're the male character. On top of this, Loki's got this weird Middle Eastern vibe whenever you go to Valhalla, despite being a Norse god. Sigurd losing his arm is obviously repeating the history of Tyr losing his arm, which symbolises and essentially establishes that their fates are bound and history will continue to repeat itself. An enraged Basim attacks Eivor, seeking revenge for Odin's treatment of Fenrir, which is Loki's son, but Eivor manages to trap Basim in the computer with Sigurd's help. From there, they leave the cave, and depending on the choices you made throughout the narrative, Sigurd will return with you or stay in Norway. Either way, you become the Jarl of Ravensthorpe. In the outside world, the characters use the information of Basim being trapped and the discovery of the cave in Norway to visit the location. The assassins deduce from Eivor's memories that the strengthening magnetic field around Earth is a result of Desmond Miles' activation of the Isu towers to protect Earth, which took place in a previous title. I could totally be wrong about this, by the way. I write this thinking the level of assumed knowledge needed to keep up the game is on par with the people that wrote it. To return the magnetic field to its proper strength, whatever the fuck that is, Layla travels to Norway and visits the temple, bringing the staff of Hermes to protect herself from the lethal radiation now within. Layla enters the temple's simulation computer and encounters Basim, who's been trapped for over 1,000 years. Basim reveals that he is the one who sent the message leading the assassins to Eivor and instructs Layla on how to stabilise the magnetic field. This in turn releases Basim. Now trapped in the simulation, Layla encounters a being called the Reader. He sounds a lot like Desmond Miles from the previous titles, but again, this isn't confirmed, and together they work to prevent another inevitable extinction event. Meanwhile, Basim steals the staff of Hermes, which contains the consciousness of his lover Alethea, I think, again, not a fucking clue, and rejuvenates his body before escaping the temple. He meets with Sean and Rebecca and requests to meet William Miles. After they leave, Basim re-enters the Animus to do something, I don't know, pass time maybe. And that's the story. From there, you can continue the game inside the Animus as Eivor to complete the remainder of tasks and quests that are left over. And that's where the main story part of the game ends. Like I was discussing before, the level of assumed knowledge needed for this game is really high, and considering this title is one that came out for the next gen consoles, they must have realised this was a massive chance to try and entice new audiences to the series, and my god have they fucking missed that mark. That said, the actual playing as Eivor part of the game, like the Viking aspect, is pretty fun. I did enjoy it, but the combat was lacking. I felt like most of the time I was swinging at air, but it wasn't bad, and I guess it did keep me entertained with the range of enemies that you went against. On top of that, it's based in England, where I live, so I got to visit Grimsby, where I live, and it was a shithole then as well. You have to build Ravensthorpe up, levelling it up from a few huts to a bustling village. Doing so allows you to upgrade weapons, get tattoos, make changes to your ship, amongst other things. The currency you need to do this is obtained by conducting raids, which is probably one of the best aspects of the game and just sort of typifies the brutality that must have taken place during that time period. The combat's strongest point is probably the finishing moves being available. There isn't a huge array of weaponry. For example, I was using the same weapons I had at the start of the game, and even if I didn't, I'd only have like 8 to choose from. Not really what you'd expect from an RPG. The Assassins part of the game is where it really just doesn't do anything for me at all. You're a Viking doing assassin type things rather than an assassin, and it really shows. There's no real emphasis on the stealth aspect of the game. Oftentimes I found myself just using it to lower the amount of guards that were present before I appeared out of a bush and headbutted a bloke's nose through his skull. There's been no real development on the stealth aspect of the game since the last time I played it, which was Origins. There is an arcing storyline for the Assassin's Creed or Hidden Ones aspect of the game where you're tasked with taking down the Order on behalf of the Hidden Ones. The Order are an enemy that are trying to push an agenda similar to the Templars, and at the time period that the game is set in, they are the enemy of the Hidden Ones, which is basically the Assassin's Creed. There are a lot of members of this Order to take out, some story related, some not, and this arc itself can take a hell of a long time to complete. Once you do so, you realise that the person at the head of it all is actually King Alfred, someone you came close to defeating if you've pledged and completed all territories in England. The end of this story arc really confused me as well. You find him at some farm making bread. Obviously he's gone into hiding, and for some reason no one on the farm knows what the King of Wessex looks like. Eivor confronts him in possibly the weirdest cutscene of the game, where Alfred basically says, "Yes, you've beaten the Order, but I didn't really like the Order and I'm starting a new group anyway." Eivor accepts this rather than booting a loaf of bread through Alfred's head. It's cool in a way because this alludes to the birth of the Templars. Eivor sort of accepts it, and then Alfred goes, "You might have beaten us, but in about 3 generations you'll all be Christian, so really we win." I assume there's going to be DLC released that explains why Basim's entered the Animus and why Eivor's body was found in North America, but in terms of the base game, this isn't really explained too well. Now, I say all this about the game, but overall, it was something that I relatively enjoyed. It's a bit hard for me to say that I didn't, considering I sunk 70 hours into it. Was it the Assassin's Creed title that's going to make me fall back in love with the series? No. And I feel that although the game is good, it's not something that's going to be reflected on as one of the best titles from this series. From what I can gather, it did tie up a lot of loose ends of previous titles, but after finishing it, it was very much a case of closing it down and just leaving it to gather virtual dust in my games library. My final note is this: it is a game you can get lost in, but it doesn't help the series that it doesn't really feel as if I was playing an Assassin's Creed title at all, barring some segments. There was a lot of parts of the game that were really fun, but overall, it is definitely not for newcomers. And if you're the person looking to branch out into new things since getting your next gen console, I probably wouldn't start with this. Honourable mentions as well for microtransactions. Go and fuck yourself. Hit the comment section below on your thoughts of this game or your thoughts of this video. I love to hear your guys' opinions, and I read every single comment I get, even the ones that affect my self-esteem. Thank you guys for listening to my rant. I appreciate you checking the video out. You guys have been awesome, and I'll see you guys next time on Cali Sunset Gaming.